This evening, Greg Stewart is going to join us and make a presentation. And Greg is a certified Californian naturalist, and he is currently the CNPS representative on the Sepulveda Basin Wildlife Area Steering Committee, as well as being a dedicated volunteer and restoration leader at the site. So tonight he will present on habitat restoration in the Sepulveda Basin Wildlife Reserve. Welcome, Greg.
Hey
So,
everybody, how y'all doing? I see a few familiar names in there. I will say yes, I'm an absolute dedicated volunteer, but I almost feel like I'm a little bit crazy, like the rest of the Dawn Patrol who are out there multiple times a week doing this. So this presentation is really an encapsulation of the work that collectively CMPS have done. For those of you who have been out there to see it, or for those who have heard about it, or even for those who didn't know about it, CMPS is out there doing stuff. So let me pull up my presentation and then I'll bumble my way through it for y'all so you can get a look at what's going on. There we go. Everybody able to see the presentation? Yeah.
yes.
And I apologize in advance for any typos. I am human. Um, it should be good to go. So again, my name is Greg Stewart. As Snowdy said, my day job, I manage a web team at LMU who do a lot of digital stuff, and so I spend a great deal of my time behind the computer. And somewhere in the middle of COVID, I was bitten by the bug of native plants and started growing them. So this is going to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll go into the work of what we're doing out there and the why of it. But first, as I was aptly reminded, I absolutely want to dedicate or at least have a recognition that is part of our commitment to recognize our place in history and location and connection to the indigenous communities of Los Angeles. I acknowledge the Tongva people as the traditional caretakers of Tongavar, which is the Los Angeles Basin, the Southern Channel Islands, and the presence of our work on their traditional, ancestral, and unceded land. We are absolutely grateful for the opportunity to live, learn, restore, and build community in this place. And something that I don't, I'm sure those who are in the know, but the space that we're working in very much was part of that ancestral land. We are just south of Los Encinos, and again, a village that was very well occupied for many, many years before anybody that we recognize today was here. So who am I? I many go by many things. I'm a horticulturalist. I'm a born and raised San Fernando Valley native. I am a certified naturalist, which is really a fancy way of saying I took a class with the UC A&R that allowed me to call myself a naturalist. I'm passionate about native plant ecosystems. I am a habitual volunteer with CMPS, a digital professional by day, and a lifelong visitor to the Sepulveda Basin Wildlife Reserve. Steve Hartman, who I don't think is on here, but has told the tale. Just like him, I remember as a small child having birthdays at Woodley Park and climbing and playing on the old equipment there that was made out of 4x4s and gave a splinter. That was your takeaway. So that's who I am. Why restoration in the space matters. So the space itself, which we'll talk a little bit about the history of it, but really the space itself has been fairly neglected for quite a bit of time. And the activity that we're doing, and I won't read all this, feel free to read it as your heart desires. But really, what we're looking to try to do is reconnect the community to the place to give it some gravity, which for quite a long time has just sort of been ignored, to support local wildlife. And that's, a very blanket statement because I have wildlife right outside of my door here. We have skunks in the neighborhood, raccoons and coyotes at times. But really to try to restore that space for not just the bigger mammals, but for the lizards, the insects, and the flying things that are around there, the birds, which are really important to some of our friends at Audubon. Save water and resource. This, it's a little ambiguous, but the more green space that we have in an area, the cooler things stay, the bigger the green canopy, especially in this urban environment. And so to replace a lot of the weeds that die out and dry out, we're putting in California native plants that would, as we believe, be there were it more a naturalized space. And so these native plants thrive with very little irrigation and maintenance once they're established, and again, make for a much nicer environment. And building climate resilience. We want to, again, try to cool the environment. And one way to do that is to put plants in there that will basically green it, provide shade, and again, help to suck up some of that heat. And then revive local identity. So a lot of folks that walk through there say they've gone through for years, but had no idea the wildlife reserve was there, or even knew that it was in fact a wildlife reserve. They saw it just as a lake that had a bunch of weedy things around it. And so we're trying to give some greater identity to it, as not just this dirt patch that you take your dog out to and walk on a Sunday evening. It is supposed to be a wildlife reserve, and what are wildlife reserves supposed to have? Native plants in it. And also to create a living classroom. So the folks that come out, we've had lots of groups. Audubon brings student groups out, excuse me, and in those groups, they learn about the plants. They learn about native plants in particular. It's always a great opportunity for me to give the elevator speech of why they're important, and why what we're doing matters, and to make the folks that are coming out there that live in the community see the space not so much as a barren land, but as a thriving ecosystem that deserves to be there and deserves to be preserved. And so again, not just for the little ones, for the big people too, for the adults, we're trying to tell them that native plants, even as a lawn replacement, can thrive, especially in these very low watering environments, very hot and dry. Where is my cursor? There you are. So why let me move that. Am I still sharing? Yeah. So why the work matters. So as part of my naturalist training, one of the things that we looked at was the way that heat's going in the San Fernando Valley. So anybody, not just San Fernando Valley, but in the world in general, but local to our area. One of the things that we really dove into was the fact that, within the next 25, 30, 40 years, the average temperature is going to exceed 106, 107 in this chart here that you can see. And essentially what that means is that there will be a lot of hot days that will basically bake us. And there is very little evidence to say that that is turning and that it's quite the contrary. There's quite a lot of evidence that's showing that it's going up. And so the work that we're doing, assuming that it survives fire and the heat, these plants that we're trying testing in this area are regionally specific and adapted to that environment. Now, whether or not they be adapted to it in 100 years from now is another story. But for right now, we are trying to put things in that are ecologically sound for this sort of heat that will be able to make it through the summer in a way that they just won't perish, like, say, a tropical or a ornamental plant might. And so why native plant ecosystems matter in suburban Los Angeles? Again, they cool the city, they clean the air and soil, it boosts well-being, being in natural spaces outdoors, saves water. If we can educate people to not have monocrop lawns and plant natives, then it's a win. And again, supporting the wildlife. So not just the big mammals, but the birds, the bugs, the lizards, the little tiny things that crawl on the ground that a lot of people might shirk from. We are trying to restore this. We'll call it a native ecosystem, but we're trying to restore this ecosystem back into some resilience, back into the San Fernando Valley. Now, again, the big question is how much of this is what should be there. Again, we'll get into in a minute because of all the interventions. But so for those of you who are joining or that are watching, the question of where is this Sepulveda Basin? If you don't know, the Sepulveda Basin is sort of in the armpit of the 101 and the 405 freeways. You can see in the first picture here the 405. So if you are traveling south towards Los Angeles, out the right-hand window behind that Burmish rock wall near Burbank, just on the other side of that is part of the basin. And where the 101, if you were to take the 101 towards Ventura, it's just north of there. And so in that space, Burbank and the 405, there is a wildlife reserve that's nestled in there. All total in the area, I want to say it's, I think I have the stat here on the next slide. Um, it didn't put the size of it. So it is a substantially large space that isn't just the lake. There's the east field, the west field. There's other adjacent areas in between the golf courses that are all considered part of the wildlife reserve. But this talk in particular is focused to the area around the lake. And so again, south of the Lake Balboa community, part of the ancestral Tongva lands in modern Los Angeles Metroplex, and just south of the Tillman Japanese Garden. So if you've been in the valley for any time and hopefully you've gone to the Japanese Garden, which is very beautiful, we are just south of that if you continue down the road a bit. So the history of the space is an interesting one. I spent a considerable amount of time trying to find pictures uh, of the area specifically, and I came up kind of empty. What I did find was a host of photographs from the San Fernando Valley regionally, and the gentleman on the horseback there was from Griffith, near the Griffith Park area along the LA River. And so you can see this is land that has been adapted, highly adapted, and used for farming and ranching, and then suburban development over time. But at a certain point, if you go back far enough, you can see it was a lot of open grassland, open rangeland. And so again, the Tongvar lands were pre-colonization. It evolved to pasture and grazing north of the historical Rancho Los Encinos, which is still there, which is now a very small complex, but was a bigger area of farming and land usage. And again, this last century, it's been in a growing evolution. So from a natural wild space of those farmlands to farm and ranch land, mid-century, it was adapted into the Los Angeles River as part of the Sepulveda Basin Dam, and then more recently as part of the Tillman Water Reclamation Plant. And then again, date-wise, sometime in the 80s, it was designated a wildlife reserve for migrating birds, which perhaps was a happy accident for them, but yeah, there may be some complexities to it as to doing that and allowing the U.S. Army Corps to sort of let it be as what it is. So the major plant communities that we're looking at is riparian forest. And Snowdy, stop me if anybody has a question or hand, if they want to throw a shoe at me and tell me I'm wrong, please do. Again, I will just ramble on with this. So the major plant communities that we're looking at is a riparian forest, a riparian shrubland, oak and walnut woodlands, and a coastal sage scrub. These are coming again from the Sepulveda Basin Wildlife Reserve Steering Committee as their habitats. I don't disagree with this. It's a very interesting space in that, as a naturalist, we like to dub areas as a particular thing. The unique thing about the wildlife reserve is that those zones can change within a few feet of each other. And so you can go from what might be a riparian area that's sort of wet and has damp edges to a very dry area that has very little moisture in the ground and in the hot summers turns into an adobe clay like surface, and you go from these extremes, and again, this is because it's such a man-made area. And so the types of plants for plant nerds like myself, again, list coming from the Sepulveda Basin Wildlife Reserve website. And I will validate that these are all plants that we have found out there or have reintroduced. I have a list that I'll show later. But this is the great big list of plants that are out there. And there are some very old toyon, so some very large toyon, a lot of, I'm drawing a blank right now. A lot of other plants though as well, but there are also a lot of invasive weeds. And as animals go, there's mammals, reptiles, fish, amphibians. I don't think I put insects. Lots and lots of birds. Again, I will spare you my going through this, but this list is from the Audubon. And there's also a lot of invasive plants. And the invasive plants have really been the principal focus for CMPS with the volunteers for a good number of years, especially with Steve Hartman and George Waddell, who I don't know if they're on here yet or if they've joined. But CMPS, if you've known it or not known it, have been out there for probably close to 15 or more years working to try and knock a lot of these invasive plants down to keep them from overtaking the space. And they've done a really good job. But I can tell you for a fact, there's a lot of mustard there. There's still a lot of hemlock. Let's see some of the others. Castor bean. We don't find a lot of castor bean, but we do find curly dock. Prickly lettuce is out there, sweet clover. A lot of these plants are still out there. And so the work, especially what we talked about on November 22nd, is to try and take the plant populations down in order to allow the native species to grow. So the challenges that we've had in the space have been invasives, a lot of neglects, habitat fragmentation, and unhoused and deliberate criminality. And I know this is the last bullet's a very sensitive one, and I'll be cognizant of it because of the very large unhoused community. But I don't want to say all of the problems are from the unhoused. There's a certain level of just we'll get to it in a minute. So invasive species, mostly volunteer controlled. Again, Army Corps has done very little to knock the invasives back. There's some initiatives with Council District 4 with Padilla, if I can remember correctly, an initiative that she's pushed through the city to control the invasives. But it hasn't been, in my own estimation, it is not a one and done. The volunteers with CMPS can probably validate this as well. It takes repeated visits over a very long period of time to reduce the seed bank down in a way that will allow it to naturalize better. And so again, it's been mostly volunteer controlled, and because of the great work of the Dawn Patrol for so many years, it's been really successful. And again, quoting the Sepulveda Basin Wildlife website, because of regular flooding and a history of agriculture, there is a large seed bank of weed seeds in the soil in the basin. And so even with so many years, the weeds come back with incredible regularity. And non-native weeds and invasive plants are a constant threat to overtake the native plants. And ongoing weed control projects are necessary. And so the germ of the work comes out of that issue, which we'll touch on in just a few moments. But again, we'll talk about the reasons for why. There's a tremendous amount of neglect. The space is owned by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and managed by LA Recreation and Parks. The U.S. Army Corps, in their ownership of it, and the rental from LA RAP, U.S. Army Corps has turned over their obligation of maintaining it to Parks, and as Parks has increasingly had budget shortfalls and budgets siphoned away, they don't have the staff or resource to do it. We've had good partnerships with them with the steering committee in the past. We seem to have less of a great relationship with them right now, just because either they're too busy or they're not interested in what we're doing. But it's a stranglehold on funding and very limited staff to do it. If I want to say they have one or two people that are out there to do anything, and they're mostly managing the interventions of folks who are using the space, perhaps not in the best or most neighbor-friendly ways. And then habitat fragmentation. So the wildlife reserve is split between the north and the south on Burbank. And has become essentially a patch ecology. And for the space that's on the south side of Burbank, that space, because it's less frequented by users, by visitors, oftentimes the fire department treats it as sort of a I don't even know what to describe it as. They treat it as a space where if something happens, if it catches on fire, they bring bulldozers in and basically scrape everything. And I think their preference would be to scrape the entire space down to dirt to keep it from burning for obvious reasons that we saw earlier this year, because an out of control wildfire in an urban center would decimate a great swath of the area. And because of the invasives, because of the weeds that grow, die, and then become kindling, it's a concern, and it's a natural space surrounded by human interventions. And then the unhoused and the criminality in the space. So there is, there's no sugarcoating it. There is a fairly large unhoused population that exists in the space. Park rangers, I say little enforcement here, but in the time that I've put this slide together, I've heard that they have had better enforcements and they're doing more. But again, little enforcement because the rangers that are able to patrol the space, patrol between the Sepulveda Basin, I want to say in Griffith Park and Hanson Dam. And so they're spread thin. And so the times that they're able to get out there to do much is very limited, though they have made some inroads. Again, fishing is rampant and off-leash dogs are, minor things, but things that still have an impact on the space because, fishing, there's a big issue with people leaving line with hooks. And then off-leash dogs, they destroy the habitat. They chase birds, they chase animals, and it's not a dog park, and so it becomes problematic. And then there's high opportunities in space for criminality. So again, the unhoused in the situation they are, there's also a large cohort of the unhoused who like to light fires, and in their living spaces have lit the place on fire. So a lot of the fires that have popped up have either been from accidental campfires that spread, or from folks who've gone through unhoused who basically like to light fires. And so a lot of the pictures that you'll see coming up are from some of those events. And then I put lewd conduct here. Again, I don't want to get too deep into that one, but depending upon the spaces that you walk in the park, the evidence is on the ground, literally. And so these are all sort of the factors that we have had to face in the space, and I think why the basin gets a little bit of a bad rap. And so the bottom line is that it's a low-funded, semi-artificial natural space in the middle of a growing density urban landscape, a dense urban landscape. So why does it need restoration? Um, the question of why it needs restoration is really the question of how I got into it. So I got into it, native plant restoration or native plant horticulture and native plants in general, by replacing my yard. I replaced my front yard, then I replaced my backyard. I just lost a Palo Verde in that September storm. It was awful. My wife was devastated. And it's taken me weeks to clean it up because I didn't trim it well enough. But I had a deep interest in native plants and started growing them quite by accident again during COVID, and somehow I managed to grow a whole lot of toyons. I contacted the Dom Patrol, and they basically told me, yes, I can come and plant the toyons, but if I do, I have to come back and water them. And then since that time, we have put in more than 400 native plants, leading hundreds of volunteers and maintaining several acres, a picture of which we'll see in a few moments here. So it's in one part, it's become a passion project, and another part, it's sort of become a calling for the need for it in a space that had no other folks out there doing it. And so how it began. These are some photographs taken at different times of the year and in different spaces, but you can see the quality of the space after a fire, after before weeds were taken out, and after a mowing. The space hasn't been treated kindly, and if you're a resident of the valley, you probably understand why. It's very it gets bushy and it catches fire, and there's weird stuff that happens in there, and it's just not a beautiful space. There's no agency and no sort of dollars that are being spent in a way to make it better. It's volunteers. And so weeds, fire, and volunteerism. The explosive weed populations, frequent fires, the Dawn Patrol weed remediation. I'm just going to keep saying them because they deserve all the credit with this, and engaging with the public at joint collaborations. The anecdotal story that I have is at one of these weed remediation events that Dawn Patrol put on a weekend. One of my first ones, we did a great big cleanup with Volar, and I had an individual who, in the midst of this great cleanup, we were clearing this great space early in the season. Someone asked, "What happens after we take the weeds out? Do you come back and plant?" And at the time, we didn't. And when I answered his question truthfully, the reality of it sort of smacked me and said, we're not doing anything after we take these weeds out. And so the weeds are literally coming back, which is what happened. And so it started the thought in the head, to plant and answer that question. What happens after we take the weeds out? And so again, we did this activity. Sorry if the slide's a duplicate. And so that effort, that question has led to probably close. I haven't measured it on Google Maps to get an accurate view, but it's led to close to 2.5 acres of plants put in the ground. So more than 400 plants. I have a horror story to tell, but we have put in to date 400, I'll call, plants over roughly 2.5 acres of territory. And if you haven't been by the wildlife reserve, I strongly encourage you to go and take a look. But you can see the zones here. The yellow zone started as our first endeavor. The blue was our second. The pinkish one was third, orange fourth, and then red is where we're at currently. As the anecdotal story goes, the very first time that we went out to put plants in November, one of the volunteers and I went out on a Saturday, and we spent probably 6.5, 7 hours of a grueling October day because I was bought into the planting season in October, put in 30 plants, and within 2 weeks, all the plants were gone. And I say gone not by some animal that came and grazed on them, not by some errant mower. Somebody went through, and that was the first spot there under where it says North Observation Deck, that yellow spot. Somebody went through, likely and unhoused, and pulled every plant out and took every plant in every cage and left no trace. And so we opted to go to the other side of the lake and have had great success on the far side in the other colored zones, with plants, and have had very minimal issue with it in what we've done. And so that initial question from that volunteer, what do you do after you take out the weeds? We wanted to put thought into action and actually put plants into the ground. So as I've already said, we've put in more than 400 plants. We have had I am going to say, a better than 75% success rate with the plantings, for reasons that we're treating it almost like a garden, but only to get the plants established and not sort of put them in the ground and say, good luck, Chuck. We have an expanding seed bank of succession. So plants are coming up, they are flowering, they are seeding. We're gathering seeds and throwing them, and we're seeing those thrown seeds actually reproduce. Some plants better than others. Gumweed seems to do phenomenally well. If we throw it into spaces that are otherwise dry, they do get some rain, like what we're expecting on Thursday, but they have come back on their own, surprising us where we have found them. And we've established year-over-year annual blooms. So not just the poppies, not just the clarkias. We are seeing plants actively go into states of succession where they are coming up, they're flowering, seeding, dropping, and new plants are coming up into their space. And so far, I would say we've reached more than 1,000 volunteers in some capacity to educate them in the space, to get them to come out. We've had folks that have come back. I know I saw someone earlier. There's someone who was a volunteer from one of those events who came out and has come back again. So we're doing something right. We're partnering with agencies. San Fernando Valley Audubon has been a tremendous partner with us. They come out in the weeks that Friends of LA River have activities, and they do bird walks after we do clearing events. LA Sanitation has sponsored an activity where they had an individual plant one of the I can't think of the name at the moment. I apologize. Where they had essentially one of their student workers who had needed a service project. He put plants in. TreePeople some years back was very active with this. Rec and Parks has been very active with this as well, in the sense of they supply us resources. We have good connections with forestry who deliver us the good mulch from Griffith Park. And if you don't know the good mulches in Griffith Park, go to Griffith Park and check it out. We've had at least one scouting Eagle Scout project. Disney has brought volunteers in through Friends of the Yellow River and the Jane Goodall Institute as well. And again, a lot of these are just in the last year who that we have grown these relationships, and individuals who've learned about us have come back and wanted to put more in. And what makes the collaboration possible? So the large group weeding events with Friends of the Yellow River, Seed Ball, and community engagement. George Waddell does a phenomenal program with seed ball making in the warm months. He gets mad if we don't have the opportunity to do it. Hi, George, if you're here. But if you haven't been to one of his seed ball activities, they're a lot of fun. You get to sit around, play with mud, and make seed balls, and really help give back to the community and volunteer planting events. I think people like the planting events way more than they like the weeding events, because it's more fun to see the fruits of your labors actually producing something. You're putting a plant in the ground that you can come back to and visit. And again, these are the pictures of what the volunteering or what the collaboration makes possible. All those plates, those are George's seed balls. The different groups of folks, those are different events with Friends of the Yellow River and then scouting. And you can see in one of our very large events that Fuller brought a very big group out, hundreds and hundreds of bags. These are the big Lowe's bags full of weeds that are coming out to create space for us to put plants into the ground. And then this is what happens when after we take out the weeds, we come back and plant now. So to that one volunteer, if hopefully you're able to hear me in this presentation, spaces that we have gone through and taken the weeds out, we have come back in and put plants. We've had tremendous success with those plants, and they continue to do very well. Again, treating them in some ways with kid gloves, but we're not mercenaries putting them in the ground and saying good luck. We're coming back and planting. And so I put a QR code in here, and I can drop it into the chat if anybody wants to pull this up and look at it. But it's a link to a Google photo gallery of close to 2,000 pictures taken over the last 4 or 5 years of the work that we've done. And so what's been successful with us is seed collection and distribution from established plants, cassie growing on its own, plant communities establishing and thriving in the space, and a growing list of return volunteers and plans for future planting, and how you can help. If you're at all interested in any of the things that we're doing, you can see pictures here. I don't know if you want me to go back to another picture of that building in the background, but you can see these are spaces that we've put plants in. If you're at all interested in getting out, getting your hands dirty, coming out and telling us we're putting the wrong plants in the ground, or just coming out and looking at the pretty flowers in late spring, please come out. You don't have to sign up. You don't have to tell anybody. We're there most Saturdays. So we have a lot of volunteering activities that are out there. Partnerships. If you know folks who are wanting to do planting, if you know scouts who are out there, or your friends of friends scouts who are looking for Eagle projects, let us know. Citizen science is absolutely welcome. The steering committee I sit on has a lot of scientists, real scientists, but we also have a lot of individuals who are very interested in the work that's happening, and who are taking notice of it. Again, the mayor's office, they're wanting to come out and do their own little thing, but again, not realizing the work that it takes to make sure the plants sustain. We have just opened a portal with CMPS to be able to accept donations. So if anybody's feeling particularly generous and wants to say, hey, I put a plant in the ground, I'll have a link for that as well. And plants. If you grow plants, if you know people who grow plants, if you're interested in growing plants, come out. We'll talk to you. We'll give you our advice for it. The first round of planting, I grew probably 200 of the plants that went out, just because I got bit by the growth bug, the horticulture bug, and just went hog wild on it. This season we're looking at try to acquiring just because of volume and time. But any of these things are open. And again, advice. If you want to come out and tell us we're putting the wrong plant in the ground, please come out and tell us, because we'll give you the reasons for why we're doing it and what we've seen with it. Oh, and I guess I'm at the end. So any questions? Uh-oh. And I do have these QR codes here. So these will take you to our various things. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast for anybody, but I will say these links. So I have tried my best to document the work that we're doing. There is a Facebook group that captures it week on week. There's an Instagram page because one didn't exist before, and I wanted to make sure that our work was showing up in people's feeds. And then also the donations. So that's what these three links are. The first one is the Facebook, the Instagram. The one on the right is the Facebook, and the middle one is I think it's the donation one. So I'm gonna.
Keep those up because
Okay.
people were asking for them. That's one of the questions.
Yeah,
So
that's great. Let me
did
get.
everybody get them?
I have some links. I'll drop some links into the chat. We will definitely talk and address your questions, and I will probably butcher answers to it. But let me drop in a few links for everybody to sort of get a sense of what we're doing. So the first one I'll drop in here, and I mentioned this to Snowdy earlier that I was going to drop links and to make it a little bit more interactive. But so what I want to share first is this was our plant palette from 2003 into 2004. It's a Google Doc. Anybody's welcome to look at it and question why we're putting the things in there that we're putting in there. What I will say is that we have some pretty good keystones. So Toyon, lemonade berry, sugar bush, and white sage. So we're trying to introduce those into the space. Some of our superstars, and this is a fun one. We've got 5 or 6 Nevins barberry that were grown from seed that seem to be doing really well out there right now. Again, early season. Uh, let's see, what else do we have here? We have sycamores in the east field that we've put out. So there's probably a dozen sycamores that are there now. So 5, 6 years, check out the basin. They should be looking elegant. And a few oaks from acorns that were collected in the space. So from trees there that were then brought home and germinated and actually have produced actual seeds. We have lots of annuals that are all growing. And here's some more links for y'all. Do. This is our Facebook group. Please feel free to smash that like button and join us. You can follow along. A lot of times it's just sort of, you can actually go to the albums and see the week by week progress. For those who are in a space to see it on Instagram, here is the Instagram. What else can I share with you? This is the good one. So this is the big photo dump, and I apologize if there may be a errant, goofy me in one of the pictures, but this is the Google album with all the pictures. So if anybody wanted to really get to the before and afters, you can dig into it and see what the space is grown into. And then I definitely want to shout out George Waddell, Steve Hartman, Robert Grizak, and Ann Abrams, all of whom I think are members of CMPS who have been the backbone of Dawn Patrol and all the many, 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 many volunteers over the years.
Well, one question that has come up because you mentioned Dawn Patrol, and
Yeah.
Dawn Patrol has been like Tuesday and Thursday really early in the morning
Yep.
um, by those folks ongoing.
Yep.
Um, and but somebody said, "Are you really there every Saturday?" Because
So
you kind of said that, but I
yeah.
thought
So
Saturdays were once a month.
so planting season. So when we start putting plants in the ground, we're trying to balance, it's the balance, the life balance, right? So for the last year, we were there every Saturday, and I think we experienced a tremendous degree of burnout. So we've backed it down to once every 2 weeks. As the rainy season comes, it may be once a month. It depends on the rain cycles. So we habitually follow the rains. We will absolutely be there the 22nd. And then we're looking to start putting plants in the ground sometime in early December. And so at that point, we'll start a 2 week cadence. And then depending upon the weather, If we get rains, it probably won't be every week. If we don't get rains, then we'll be there to make sure that things are watered. So it's conditional. We don't have to make this exclusive. If you want to come out, look at what we're doing, and get the experience, especially for those who are really into it. We have some folks who are really into it. Um, if you wanted to start a cohort to do it as well, we would fully support it. We will supply the plant list, we supply the know-hows, pass on our learnings. Some of the things that I didn't mention is how we tend to the plants. For those who've been out there and have seen it, we hand water everything. And when I say hand water, we have one, two, three, four, six electric pumps that use like 5 or 8 amp batteries that basically pull the water from the lake, and we pump it 100, 200 feet up the grade to get to the plants. And so this is one of the reasons why, in one of those slides back a few, um, the plants, why we're going following the contour of the lake. It's because it's proximity to water. Hey, there's George. Yep. I see him in the chat. Um, and so, yes, so Dawn Patrol is there, and they absolutely would love to have folks out. I think if y'all said you wanted to come out, George would be out there more often on Saturdays as well. He has picked up some of the slack for us and is trying to get some folks out there to do more weeding too. The weeds are an ever growing thing.
Well, I would think that at a bare minimum, if somebody didn't have, not everybody can go Tuesday and Thursday mornings. And if Saturdays are kind of limited, here's a big Saturday coming up. This is your chance to at least show up and get your name on a list. And George gave his email address for contacting. So contact him. It's in the
Oh,
chat,
okay,
George Waddell,
got it.
Yep.
to get to 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 get the ball moving. Somebody also at that same person said, what is the location? Where do you meet?
So yeah, it's a super good question. So in the emails that I send out, and I'll drop my email in there also. You can send me a note and I'll add you to my list. Where is my email? Here's the whole thing. Am I still sharing? I'm gonna stop sharing, everybody, so you can see my beautiful face. There we go. This is my contact information. I'm going to put it there as well. So I send out a weekly email. George sends out a terrific email. And essentially it's letting anybody who's interested know, days in advance. I post to Facebook as well, that when and where we're going to be. Typically when we're there, we meet in the dirt parking lot under the big lone pine tree, if that rings any bells. So when you come in, turn right at the Tillman Japanese Garden, and then follow the road all the way back till you get to this big giant. Before you get to the archery range, there's a dirt parking lot with a single pine tree in it. That's essentially where we meet. George's group tends to be out there earlier, so Dawn Patrol is out there at the break of dawn. We tend to start when we're doing planting or the Saturday events. We start at about 7:30. I roll up at about 7:30.
Okay.
And just so y'all know, we have kept this to a degree informal, um, in some respects um, to keep it nimble and not make it an organized event. Oftentimes it's a work. I'm going to be out there doing work. If you want to come out and do work alongside, you're more than welcome. Because when we start getting hyper organized, then it starts taking on bigger organizational issues and have different requirements with parks and rec and parks. So again, it is, as George taught me, it's a volunteer event. Come on out if you want to do it with us, and you can participate.
Um, just getting to questions, the goat question was asked and kind of answered in the chat, but basically, there's been a
We
lot of support for it, but the answer has been no.
I'll say so.
Uh,
Even as recent things have sort of come up, I think that we might be hearing more about goats. So the issue with goats is that it comes down to money. First, who's going to pay for it? I think CD4 has some money that they may send our way, even Friends of Valley River. And we have had a very hard time. So with the steering committee for the area has had a very rough time. Sorry, I don't mean to say tremendous so many times. We've had a very rough time in getting the fire department on board with it. The anecdotal story is that as we get one fire chief or one captain interested in it and looking like they're going to move forward, they get transferred, and the process all starts over again, where we have to convince people, and then even some members of the steering committee are dubious on the benefits of goats because the claim is that the goats eat the plants, eat the seeds, and then poop the seeds out with fertilizer and just repopulate it all. But the science on it. It depends on the research that you look at, but I think where we're leaning now is that the reduction in the seed volume makes the goats worthwhile. So bringing them into large pasture areas and letting them clear crop it down. But it would there's a need for somebody to go in afterward and reseed it with the plants that should be there. And so it's that sort of complex mechanism of who's doing what in the planning process of that I think is perplexing to some that are trying to organize it. So there is an interest in goats, absolutely. And if you know somebody who wants to volunteer and bring goats out, please let me know.
On a related note, um, I had read this article where they had figured out that this one kind of herbicide, um, th- uh, it can kill non-native plants and but spare the native ones and their seed bank, and in turn enhance the habitat for deer. I was wondering if such a herbicide could be used to remove the invasive plant species here while leaving the native ones intact.
It's a very good question. I will say so the steering committee, which is made up of a whole bunch of different environmental groups, CNPS being one, Audubon, Sierra Club, and some others. There are aspects of that committee that are vehemently against using herbicides of any kind. And so as Bill will probably attest, there are some invasive plants that you have to use herbicides for, tree heaven being one of them. You can't just cut it down and it'll go away. You have to treat it. And so to convince some of those members that the some herbicides are okay to use is a bit of a bigger challenge than just going out there and using them. I'm sure it is a sort of a sore topic that we don't get into very often because of the pushback from some of the other organizations. So the leaning, and even the city, they want to be the peacemaker with it, and so they'll defer on the side of no herbicide because the demons of Monsanto. And so I don't think that that's been a big consideration for the space. Plus the size of it, like to have somebody go through and do the spraying, it would have to be industrial in scale, and so they would probably have to dump so much pesticide in there that it would probably freak a lot of folks out. But it's a very good question. And again, because of how long they've been battling the weeds out there, I'm sure any help would be good, but it is a very live wire to even bring it up to some folks.
Well, it was my understanding, and Bill Neal has he's at this session to this
Yeah.
evening. But it was my understanding that Rec and Parks said that we could not do herbicides, right, Bill? We have to,
That was the manager's decision some time ago, based on a city council vote against glyphosate, which did not cover other herbicides, but the Rec and Parks manager made it more broad, is my understanding.
I think it's the stigma of using sprays and using chemicals that just sort of, you mention it to somebody and you can see the ones who are adamantly against it, like there's a physical reaction to them, like sprays. Um, there are so many weeds out there. We could probably dump hundreds of gallons of killer on on a lot of those plants, and it's still not make a dent to it. So it has to be a tool in the toolbox. How we convince the powers that be, though, it's for now it's rice cutters and hands.
Well, speaking for my knowledge of CNPS policies, nobody in CNPS statewide would ever do wholesale spraying or promote wholesale spraying. And
Exactly.
that's nothing that our chapter has ever done. It's been spot spraying of certain plants in certain very limited places. And so nobody would ever in CNPS be out there promoting um, wholesale gallons and gallons of spray. And Matthew, to get back to you, I don't know of any herbicide that is only going to kill non-invasive, non-native plants. I think a plant is a plant, and an herbicide that is specific to a certain plant type is going to kill a plant whether it's native or not, right, Bill?
Yeah, it runs by the plant family, whether
Yeah.
it's sunflower family or legume or whatever. It all depends on the plant family. Some herbicides affect broadleaf plants, but not grasses. Some are very strong on angiosperms. Anyway, if I have the right name, the sunflower family. But anyway,
If you want, I could try to
I
find an
can't think.
article for you.
Yeah, sure. Yes, that's an interesting idea. I don't know how it would work, but if somebody came up with that idea, I would certainly look at it.
Another thought that was brought up was the idea of doing a test plot in the basin.
Yeah, so we're absolutely open to it. If anybody knows the folks that are doing it and wants to put us in contact, absolutely. We would talk to them. I even want to say some of the planting knowledge that we've applied have come out of the work of the test plot folks in more densely planted areas. So putting more plants in a smaller area. One hand, it helps with irrigation, and the other hand, it sort of survival of the fittest. Let's see who makes it. And so we've applied some of the learnings from different things that we've read from them. I think we're absolutely open to it. It becomes a balancing act of how much time in the day do you have to go out and plant versus how much do you have to go out and politic and find, folks to help you do it. So, if anybody knows somebody, absolutely share my contact and we'll talk to him.
Joey Farewell works with them, if you know
Yeah.
Joey.
I don't think I do, but again,
Okay.
if he even overhears somebody who's like, we want to do another test plot in the valley. I heard of some plants that I think that they found in a dig site that re-germinated from seed bank from hundreds of years ago. A vetch that I was wanted to see if we can get our hands on it to put it out there, because it seemed like if it thrived in that space, hot, arid, dry, it would do well here. Like it might be a good test spot. But again, it's if you know somebody, hook me up. But
Was it a
otherwise,
previously extinct
I,
species, or was it just a population, the genetics that had been lost?
I want to say it's the former. I want to say that they thought it had been extinct and they had dug something for some oil recovery or something, and in the soil that they turned over, it had it in the seed bank. It's coming back up, and it was. I mean, this was maybe I think I read this article in the last year or so. I'd have to dig into it, but again, it's just one of those things where it's like, if the opportunity were to present itself to introduce something like that, I think it'd be a phenomenal thing. And something I didn't mention in the presentation about the space, there has been so much development in that area. So between the Tillman being built, the dredge out of the low point, that's a lake now, the building of the 405 and the 101, the dam. I don't think that space has seen a native ecosystem in at least 100 years. and the last time it did, it was probably closer to grassland for feed and fodder for animals. This native seed bank, or what we would call a native seed bank, is probably multiple tens of feet below ground at this point because of all the earthwork that's happened between the 405, the Tillamook. Like it has been an artificially grown native space, again, with the work of Steve Hartman way back, and just reintroducing plants to it. So even like as a natural space with a seed bank to sprout back, I don't think it's there. So anything that we could bring in that would do well there, I think would be a win for us.
Okay, and Bill, just to let you know, my email is madmammoth@gmail.com, so that I send me your email and I'll try to find that article for you about the herbicide.
In the chat.
Okay.
And um, Gregory, if you could do the same, I'd love to find out about that plant that you talked about that was previously thought extinct, but they found 500-year-old seeds.
Yep, I'll see what I can find and I'll forward it on. I want to see
Speak-
probably the CMPS article I saw it through, but I'll see what I can find and I'll share it along.
I read something similar with where they excavated from a Native American burial site these squash seeds that were 500 years old and from an extinct variety of squash, and they were able to grow them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's neat when stuff like that happens. They're resilient. That's one thing we're finding, is that plants are very resilient. They just need the leg up to be able to sustain.
Mm-hmm.
Another question that came up was, for the restoration work that you're doing there in the basin, what's the limiting factor? Is it volunteers? Is it plants? Is it money?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say it's all of the above. So in the tangible side, it's volunteers, so the bodies to help put them in the ground and then to maintain them, and then the watering work, that's sort of the sweat equity that goes into it. And then it's the cost of the plant. So initially we were growing them on our own, but growing them on your own, if you've ever grown any number of plants from seed, it becomes kind of onerous. It's like taking care of kids. You get a lot of them and it's like, I got to take care of them all the time. And so it funds to do it. This last season, we had a generous benefactor who bought out the plant sale. So the CMPS, one of our local plant sales, I want to say it was our spring sale. He purchased everything that didn't sell at the plant sale, and all of that went into the ground. I'm sure he doesn't mind me saying it was Steve Hartman. But I think the cost of it surprised him. And so it was sort of like hey, I'll do a thing. And then it was like, oh God, I'm going to do a thing. And so, yeah, costing. And this is why through CMPS, we opened up that gateway portal to donate. I think I have that link also. It was in one of the slides, but I had it somewhere. Maybe I didn't grab it.
We
But
put it in our newsletter too.
yeah. Okay, so yeah, if anybody, like I said, if anybody is feeling particularly generous with the holiday season, we will gratefully accept it. Again, I'm looking at buying plants. We work with local suppliers here in the area. Theodore Payne is a good one for some of the more unusual plants. Matilaha out in Moore Park is a great provider. And then I think we're looking at Devil Mountain for some of the bulk stuff. I think with this planting season, our focus is sages and buckwheat, because we're going up into the higher, drier, arid areas, and we're looking to try to put plants that will be able to make it through the hot summers better.
Is there something that's helpful to do to avoid introducing pathogens? Is this even relevant?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So interestingly enough, I think the water that's in the lake is full of pathogens. What we have found is that in the flooding events with the big rains that we get here now seasonally, there was something that was in that water that when it flooded, every toyon that was inundated lost its leaf. The plants didn't die, but they inherited some very strange pathogen. We were never I can't remember what it was offhand. We, just through spot observation, we didn't test it and have it looked at. And so to try to reduce introduction of pathogens, I would say we haven't been overly cautious, but at the same time, we're making sure that the province of things is reputable and that, the challenges, I think in a lot of ways, what we're doing provides a better service than necessarily trying to be overtly cautious of what goes in. The space that's in there, there is human waste in there, there's animal waste in there, there are animal carcasses. Like it could get to be kind of an icky place if you're really rooting around in some of the bushes and some of the plants. So just the number of things that are out there. We haven't seen any sort of foreign pathogens that were out there that influenced or that impacted the plants. Um, yeah, the right answer would be yes. We're cleaning our tools every time, and we're doing this. I wouldn't say that that's happening, but we're pumping lake water out and planting onto the plants. So, what pathogens are coming out of the Tillman that's not being caught. Like it's, the devil the devil you don't know. It can get kind of funky sometimes.
Well, you've already said that whatever you're planting out, you have a greater than 75% success rate. Um, Sometimes when people are talking about pathogens, they're talking about Phytophthora, that that root pathogen that is common in nursery plants, but I don't think it's that common down here in the South. It's a big problem in Central and Northern California
Yeah, I would say
nurseries.
it's definitely something that it crosses our mind, but the question is what we're putting in doing more good than harm. The space itself is, I call it, and people look at me strange, but the space has been treated like a train yard. Like no one has done anything with it in a very long period of time. And a lot of the space is just left fallow to sprout weeds. And the mustard at times grows taller than me, and I'm 6 foot and far out as my arms can go, and that's one plant. So it's we are really trying to I feel like I'm sort of dancing around the question. um yeah, it is a concern, but the greater concern is getting the plants in the ground. So
Sounds great. Any other questions, people? Those are all been great questions. Any other comments? Early on, Mary Montes had just a comment that really the main reason for planting native plants is to provide for our native pollinators, and without the native plants, you don't get the native pollinators, and there is a crash in our insect population. So um, that is certainly true.
yeah, and that's one of the big things that we're concerned with. And we're seeing, it's hard to say season to season, but I feel like we're seeing more insect communities there than in times past. And other times there have been plagues of certain insects. Now we're seeing insects that we would expect to see in there. The space is still small. You think 2.5 acres is a big space, but give it 2 or 3 years when these plants have become established, and I think we'll see greater enclaves of insects in it.
Well, just the fact that there's so many birds there tells you there are insects.
Yeah.
Because and you go and walk through there, the place is full of gnats.
Yeah.
So there's something there that
Yeah.
the birds are eating.
Very true.
So thank you, Greg. It's been very, very interesting. Thank you so much for all the work you guys are doing, and I hope you have a great turnout on November 22nd at 8 a.m.
Yeah,
and
thanks very much.
get a bunch of people out, get people involved.
That's it. That's it. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to do it. If anybody wants the slideshow, let me know. I'll send it along the PowerPoint. And then you can, again, look over what we've done. Feel free to peruse the links. Facebook, if you're a Facebooker, join it. If you're an Instagrammer, join that. Or if you even just want to keep up with the emails that we send out, shoot George or I an email and we'll put you on our list and we will send you an email almost every week to let you know what we're doing. We even try to put a joke in there or two.
Yeah, I'd really
Um,
like to have the slides. That'd be great.
Well, we're going to post this.
Sorry.
But yeah, you could send him, if you want the slides, that's great. But this presentation is being recorded and we're going to post it on our webpage.
I'm
So,
sorry, I forgot about that.
yeah, it will be a week or two before that happens, but we do that if the speaker gives us permission. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
okay, thanks everybody. Thanks for
Thanks.
attending and hope to see you on the 22nd at the basin or in Tahonga Wash for the hike. And next month is our December 9th program, which should be very interesting. Thanks. I'm gonna close.
Thanks, Tal.
Bye-bye.